So welcome to the Decorating Pages podcast Emmy nomination roundtable. This episode, I am joined by our 1 hour production designers of contemporary period and fantasy. Let's start with Howard Cummings of Fallout. Hello.
Hi.
Trevor Smith of Fargo.
Hello.
Martin John of The Gentleman.
Hi.
David Brotman of Ripley.
Oh.
And Helen Jarvis of Shōgun. Hello, Helen.
Hello.
Thank you all so much for joining me in this. This is like a dream come true to talk to like so many talented people at once, and like you know how I love to dork out. So thank you all thank you all for doing this. And the amazing work that has come out this year is just phenomenal. And I have enjoyed all of your shows and all of your work this season. So thank you so much for putting so much effort into everything. And I just loved it. So thank you. And I'm obviously the voters have too. I wanted to start out with just a general question. What was a show or a film that influenced you to get into the business, to be a designer? Can I start with Helen? Ladies first, maybe?
Oh, I don't know. I think it was actually a play. When I was a child, my father taught at a drama school in England, and I remember going backstage as a small child and just marveling at how everything was made of papier-mâché and chicken wire and rope that had been sprayed gold, you know. And I just thought, wow, as a little kid, I just loved that, making things real out of nothing. And I think that's really I can't say, perhaps Vertigo. I don't know what film might have influenced me. I really don't know. But certainly going backstage to see many different plays as a small child was really the start of it.
Oh,
My desire to.
I'm sure seeing it in person must have, yeah.
Yeah. It was. I just wanted to make things that was, you know, it was the artificiality of everything really appealed to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what got me interested in taking a design program and going into theatre. Actually, that's where I started from. So, yeah.
Martin, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. When I was sort of a teenager, my parents took me to see Towering Inferno, and I just loved the whole. I was so involved in the world and how glamorous it was, and you know these people stuck in this building on fire, and I just loved the drama of it, and I just wanted to be part of that whole, you know, make believe. So I think it was that film that really got me excited. You know, I didn't know how they could do it, and I just really, really loved it.
Yeah. Again, like the magic of it.
Yeah, it was totally. I mean, when I was an architecture student, my dissertation was on Oscar Deutsch. He was the founder of Odeon Cinemas, and he once said that you know, going to the cinema is a fur coat which everyone can afford. And it was that beautiful fantasy of going to the cinema to lose yourself and to go somewhere where you couldn't go in real life. And I think Towering Inferno just took me there.
Wonderful. David?
The Godfather.
Mm.
I was, you know, I started as a theater designer and no intention of doing anything but pursuing that career. And I was just so taken with how beautiful it was. And again, being drawn into a world. And I didn't make the transition immediately after that, but that's what I held in my mind's eye as I started working as a production designer.
Yeah, well, that I feel like Godfather influences so many,
Yeah,
Yeah.
so many ways.
that was an easy one.
Yeah. Trevor?
I think for me, my answer would be Barton Fink, the Coen brothers. It coincided with my discovery of art house cinema in the late 80s. And I think they had a Coen brothers weekend where it might have been a double bill with Blood Simple. And it was a combined revelatory moment for me where it wasn't just about design in film as much as just film as a concept and the level of artifice and control that's possible. And the Coen brothers, as we know, tend to work in a hyper-controlled sort of prefabricated, on the interesting and stimulating edge of artifice. And when I saw Barton Fink, that hotel, the wallpaper, that painting and the final scene that cuts through to the beach, I realized that cinema can be so much more, and that visual language is multifaceted, right from performance through to the design, the cinematography, and the lighting. So that was probably a turning point in the road for me in terms of imagining and knowing what's possible in cinema. So
That's beautiful. Yeah. And Howard?
I think the first film that hit me, other than The Wizard of Oz, when I was a kid, was Jaws. Because I actually was a lifeguard on the beach at the time, and it was a movie that grew on me, and I began to appreciate more and more the more I rewatched many times. And I remember I had an interview with I think at the time he was 21-year-old Bryan Singer, and Bryan said, "What's your favorite movie?" And I went, Contempt by Godard, which I actually is one of my favorite movies. And it was such a preposterous thing. And he said, "Mine's Jaws." And I went like, "Oh, you're right. Jaws is so much better." And I was, and so I think just how that movie shot. I mean, it looks like a 1940s movie. When I look back at it now, it looks like, the way everybody talks and acts, but they didn't have a lot of money, but the, sort of pace of it, sort of the, all the really difficult things they had to go through to shoot it. I think, unfortunately, I like all that part. So I seem to gravitate toward movies that cause me to have to climb things or go underwater. Something. It's like probably should take it easy, but I don't tend to do that. So
well, it invoked emotion in you, and it probably made you like
it did, and yeah, to physically do something like that is and connect with the work and in this very physical way, for me, is really gratifying.
Yeah, it's so weird. I keep reading all these film books, and Jaws keeps coming up about how it was so impacted, of how it was the first big blockbuster. And then I just read this book about John Williams and how impactful the music was, because Steven Spielberg really didn't have any shots of the shark. The shark was only in the movie for like 8 minutes, and how the music really made the Jaws. And so it's so funny that you say that, because I'm like, I gotta rewatch Jaws. It's on my list to rewatch lately. So yeah. They're so different of what influences us to get into this. For me, I would say Goonies or E.T.
Goonies, yeah.
Those emotions, like something about like the adventure or being a part of it. Like, how did they do that? How did they get that big boat? Or like E.T. and the flying and the emotion of it.
I worked on Goonies, actually.
You worked on Goonies?
Yeah, when I did like props or something like back, made props to make props when I started out. So
Howard, I have your email.
Yes. I was really peripheral. So
we're doomed, my friend. So on the projects that you have been nominated for, I am assuming you were all on location for these, correct? All of you were, yes.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk. Yeah, I wanted to talk about the challenges of being on location for these, and the builds that you had to do, and finding locations for these, for the scripts and everything, and the challenges for that. So I wanted to start maybe with David, of going into, I mean, you're following a script, you're following the book, and you're following, I know that you already had the book to go with, but what were some of the challenges in finding the locations for this?
The only challenge was really the number of locations that we had to find, and the fact that we were, all over Italy in 7 different cities, as well as New York. I don't know, it's a joy working there. So, and the options are limitless, quite frankly. So, I don't know. I mean, we had a couple of challenges. Dickie's Villa was a huge challenge at the beginning, and landing on the town we were going to use on the Amalfi Coast. So those were the sort of challenges, but I don't know.
Just
We had, we had all of Italy there at our hands.
yeah.
New York, we had done great.
When I watched it, I thought the same thing. I mean, the choices you made, because I had my father remarried an Italian at some point, and so I spent a lot of time in Italy. And I think every place you picked was like I kept going, everyone that showed up, I just kept going, oh my God, I can't believe he found this, like the perfect place. It's just, and it was so perfectly also detailed in I just was like, I kept
All right,
watching.
stop, Howard.
I know, it's like, I was really kind of like, oh my God. And then I would just watch it, just because I wanted to take a trip to Italy. And I was like,
Yeah.
the thing I was doing was so crazy. And I was going like, I want to be there so bad. And it was beautifully done.
I mean, I had this sort of I've worked in Italy before, so we had done Catch 22 2 years prior to that, and I'd done Casanova. So in a way, like Venice, no problem. Check out all those locations, done. And for Catch 22, although we were in Sardinia for a good part of it, we shot almost everything else in Rome. So all of that was pretty well scouted and realized, and in my head when I was reading the scripts.
Yeah.
Can I ask about
Yeah.
the choice, whether it was the director or whoever the producers, to film it in black and white? And how did that impact on your choices?
Yeah.
I've never really had to work to that restriction, and I just wonder, how did you find that?
I mean, so that completely comes from Steve's Alien. You know, from before I received the scripts. And I mean, here's what I'll say, and I'm sure you all would sort of, you've all been there, especially when you're researching for a period film, you're looking at a lot of black and white photography.
Yeah.
And so, it's been my dream to do a black and white film. And again, just coming from my love of photography and from spending so much time with it in research, that I don't know, it was just a pleasure. You scout a location, you go back and you put it into iPhoto, and then you hit moi, and you see exactly what you need to do. I mean, you're looking for contrast.
Yeah, yeah.
Is the key. And then even more so than that, it's the lighting. So, but it's what we do with color film also, right? We're always thinking about the source of light and sort of composing a world that makes sense for the story. So I'd like to say it was a big challenge. And I've just recently read back on prior to Technicolor, what were the tricks? And we never had to rely on any of those tricks. Your eye kind of tells you, when you're out shooting a location, right, in color, you're always looking for the perfect frame, right? And if you're trying to sell it, you're hoping for the perfect light. And so it was just an extension of that. It really was, not to mention all the little tricks they have in post.
Yeah, sure. Okay.
When you're on, when I know this is dumb, but when you're on set and you're looking, through the camera and you're looking at what they're shooting, is it in black and white or is it in color?
Yeah, we had a black and white monitor and a color monitor.
Okay.
On it all the time. Steve only looked at the black and white monitor. For myself, like I found we had to do a lot of concept illustrations. And in the concept illustrations, it was always best to start first in color, because in color, you're seeing a lot more detail. And then when you put it into black and white, you can see, oh, I don't have to worry about that anymore. Like contemporary glass and windows, and just lots of little kind of dumb things like that, trying to get the cross off the list.
Right. Martin, what was your challenge for location and finding that, finding that mansion, finding that,
I suppose like you all, we just have so many sets to find. And because of the limitations of the budget and the shooting day and how many days we can shoot an episode for, you're always trying to clump locations together. So, and we had to be within an hour's travel from the unit base in central London. So that was always a huge restriction. So finding the main house was the first problem. And because I'd worked on the Gentleman, the film, I was the supervising art director on it. I knew the problems we were going to have. Like we went through 24 country houses before Guy Ritchie said he liked one. And then, so I knew that finding the house was the main key. And we managed to do that in about 3 weeks. But I couldn't get one near London. So we had to make the decision that it was overnight to go to this house. So by doing that, we had great exteriors, great vistas, and great architecture around the house. But we couldn't really go in the house at all because we couldn't afford to put the crew up to stay there. So then I had to find rooms or build rooms that were likable to the architecture of the house. And we're talking about Badminton House, which is like 1750, 1800 by the time it was finished. And they'd all been on the grand tour around Europe. So everything is hugely fabulous and ornate, and silk wall coverings and, furniture by God knows who, but it's just amazing. And collection, they had so much money in the days, these aristocrats. So to match that was the biggest problem. And the house then became 5 locations, and then it was getting availability. Because you know what it's like. Your actor is only in for 3 days for this episode, but he's in that scene, and then trying to meld.
We're always available. I don't know what the deal is. What's the deal?
So that was the big problem. And then we had a studio, and I had to try and cram all these extra sets into the studio and build them in enough time. And yeah, it's just, we all have to do that. It's such a puzzle these days. And I think getting the 5 or 6 locations and the set builds to feel like they were seamless for the Halstead Manor was the biggest issue. And I spent a lot of time going back and forth and being shown locations which weren't really good enough or didn't fit or didn't allow us enough scope for an 8-episode series, because we only had 2 scripts when we started. That's the other thing, scripts, they give you 2 and they say, yeah, we want to do this series. And you have to sort of like put a design, a footprint together very, very quickly, which is then going to take them for the next 5 months. And you needed to have scope for everything. Were the doors in the right place? Were people going to fall through windows? Whose heads going to get blown off? Where are the baddies going to come? How do they get out of the space? So it was always, you have to just build in, when you're looking at locations, all of those sort of like parameters, and hopefully experience allows you to be lucky.
Howard, with your builds, were your locations, I'm assuming you had a lot of builds on location, like big lots. I don't know. I don't know where you built.
It was there was a lot of sets. Yeah, when I to amplify what Martin said, when we started out, I didn't know exactly where it was set. It ended up being, we were in New York. I was working on it was kind of weird. I was working in development on another project that had been on for about a year. and I had a crew, and then all of a sudden that kind of, oh, it's not happening, but yay, we have this other script. And Amazon seems to like it. So well, why don't we do that? And I go, what is it? They go, Fallout. And I go, Fallout? And I went, okay. And then I read it and I'm going, oh my God, this is as big as the other thing was. Are you guys crazy? How are we going to do this? And I had a script, and it turned out that the script evolved, and so suddenly I go, this is supposed to be post-apocalyptic Los Angeles, but we're in New York, and I'm going, which is a classic movie thing, you know, like, and
Don't shoot it.
3D thing. It's like, wow, okay, yeah, you know, and it's weird. Most everybody was from LA. Second season has moved back to LA, but it's set in Las Vegas, so hey, it keeps going. But yeah, and I had one script, and so I had to do the same challenge of, hey, you have to imagine what might be coming. And so I just started with the vault and just to start designing the vault. And the writers are going, what are these long hallways for? And I said, well, you know, I figured it'd be talking, walking, and you know, and they go, but I mean, we really long hallways, like giant. And I kind of went overboard, but you know, it was like, but I thought it was important for what it was. And so, but the bigger thing is trying to knit all these things together to try to like just, it wasn't you know, oh, by the way, you managed to put together a very sexy country house. Like, I think probably better you didn't go to one country house, because it was super sexy country house that, you know, and it came together very well because, you know,
I could take all the best bits.
You took all the best parts, and I think it ultimately served you well, because that was the sexiest country house I've ever seen. And it was like also sexy people. It was great. So, and this was like, okay, it's post-apocalyptic and it's Los Angeles. And we did manage to shoot a few things in the city, but then we had to go out to upstate New York, and then to like up to Westchester and Long Island. And I mean, you know, who knew that there was a cave in, I think it's Roslyn, New York. It's right below Woodstock. There's a cave. It's really amazing cave. And it's not really a natural cave. It was the mine for the cement that made the Brooklyn Bridge.
Wow.
And the guy who dug it out engineered it with columns to hold up the interior. So as they dug it, it wouldn't collapse on them. And it is stunningly beautiful. And they use it for concerts and things in there.
Wow.
And I'm going like, wow, who knew? And so you can find crazy things in New York like that. And also there was one place, there were all these buildings in water, and it was a quarry, and it's called a place called Verplank, also up that way. There was a quarry that had flooded, and all the buildings were in the water, and this was perfect for me. And I was going, yeah. And so we, you know, and you know, everybody's
shoot it.
But it's like trying to convince it wasn't quite an overnight, but they were really not happy with me. Like I'm going, well, but probably the most extreme was we went to Namibia. Like I know it was like, and it was weird. We went to Namibia for when Lucy comes out of the vault and she gets into the post-apocalyptic world. That's Namibia, and it was fun, you know, because I'd been working with Jonathan Nolan for a while on Westworld and stuff, and he found that place like years ago. He said there's this place called Kolmensklop. And it was a mining town, a Beers diamond mining town that was built around the turn of the century and sort of closed down right after World War II. And then it just got eaten by sand and this giant sand dune. Now, a whole coastline of Namibia is all sand dunes, and they directly hit water. It's very dramatic. It's beautiful.
In New York State? Wait, where are you?
Oh, no, this is in Namibia.
Namibia.
Where is Namibia?
Namibia is above South Africa and Africa.
Yeah, Africa.
Yeah, we went to
Africa.
Africa. So, and then we also went to Utah to the Bonneville Salt Flats. So at one point, I was a little frazzled because we were shooting in New York. We put up a digital stage called a Volume. So I had a virtual art department. I had the New York art department. I had the South African, Namibian crew, and I had the Utah crew all going at the same time at one point. And so I was a little harried. And at the time, it was like crazy, but Namibia was a blast. It was great. I mean, I have it was no one had ever shot there. There was a documentary about the local hyena population. And they were unusual because they're blind. And the reason they're blind, they aren't born blind. They go blind because 40-mile-an-hour sandstorms every afternoon, pretty much. And there's pictures of me where that's why I was saying I unfortunately have this tendency to do crazy things like this. So and it was also protected. And the blind hyenas would come up on you. And and they were big, you had to get away from them if you could. So, I mean, it was nuts, but it was really beautiful. Beautiful in its ruin. The buildings are you go inside and they're filled with sand. And we had been looking at this for 4 years, and it's very Tarkovsky. Jonathan Nolan had, for other sets I had done in LA, had asked, I had to bring truckloads of sand and bury the sets in sand. Wow. And it was all based on this place. And finally, we were in our first production meeting, and we were sitting there with a producer. Like, I was already on. I was on before everybody because it sort of happened that way. And it was like, and I just said Namibia, and Jonathan Nolan goes, Namibia, and the producer goes, Namibia, and I said, this one
the swear word.
How to go to Namibia. So we kind of tricked the producer into saying, yeah, we could do it in pre-production. We just need a couple of actors to walk around. Of course, it did not end. It ended up dragging everybody to Namibia for a couple of weeks, including like crazy suits of armor that had to walk around and weird futuristic stuff. And, and it was, but that was really fun. So those were kind of location. There were a lot of location challenges on that one. So, but fun ones.
And when are you ever going to have blind hyenas on a location?
I know.
Might win.
They were coming up toward the catering tent, and I said, everybody, we should probably eat, like a whole bunch. Maybe we should go in the building. So we did.
Poor Helen was only in Vancouver.
I know. I'm envious of all of these fabulous locations, because to do 17th century Japan in Vancouver was a challenge. It was. I mean, there's nowhere you can go to. There's nothing you can shoot. I mean, there were a couple of little Japanese gardens here that are beautiful, but prohibitive, not allowed into them. And I think the biggest challenge was finding the backlots. I did start with a blank page, which is luxurious because, as I say, there was nothing available in terms of a location. So nailing down the right backlots was the biggest challenge at first. We had oodles of stage space, and we had, I'm making it sound very easy, 10 scripts. I'd never done a series before, so it was all very new to me. I'd only worked on feature films. Everything's got a very different kind of dynamic to it. And the idea that I would work with different directors was a challenge, not an unusual thing for me. So I went out in the pouring rain and the snow and the mud and stomping all over the coastline in British Columbia, trying to find available privately owned waterfront, which is a rarity. And once we'd nailed that down, we also found a really good Swiss gun club, which is exactly what it sounds like, run by Swiss people. There's a big chalet in the middle of it, and lovely property. And what had happened during COVID lockdown, they had lost a lot of membership. They'd lost a lot of funding. They were very, very keen to hire out the property to us. It was a long way away comparatively from our base of operation. And it was just a really lovely, rugged piece of property. It had everything going for it. And I was trying to find a place to build my samurai village. We had an advisor on the show who really maintained that the village should have been built on absolutely flat ground. That would have been more appropriate. But what we had was a little valley that was actually a car park filled with these sort of stanchions that came up because people would park their RVs there. All of these keen sporting types would come from all over Canada and would park their RVs in this car park, little tarmac car park. But what it had going for it was this beautiful surrounding undulating topography with gorgeous trees, sunlight streaking through. So like when we walked that property, you just knew it right away. That was going to be one of our major backlots. And then the other challenge was finding a place, again, waterfront, close to Vancouver. There was a disused cedar mill that had been out of use for 10 or 15 years. And they'd built a man-made inlet where they'd actually loaded up barges with cedar chips back in 1905. It was put together. And that, I mean, I was literally up to my knees in squelching mud with a snowstorm and looking around this property. It was like a sea of massive machinery. And the fellow showing us around said, "Oh, don't worry about this. We can get rid of that. That'll all be gone." I go, "Right, okay, I've heard this before." And he was very true to his word. They had a real strategy for removing massive, I'm talking stuff that's like 60, 70 feet high, big conveyor belts. But what really did it for me was the inlet. It was a beautiful little inlet. And I thought, well, the coastline of Osaka City is very convoluted. There's no actual one particular harbor. So I thought, well, we can get away with, this being a finger, a little part of the harbor, and we could build our town around that. And so once we nailed down those, that took us the first month and a half or so of lots and lots of trudging around, which I love. Like, it's lovely to be outdoors. I do love an outdoor set. And 50% of our show was shot on backlots outside, which was a treat. And the other 50% was on stage. Another challenge for us was creating enough garden space on stage because every single interior had to have shoji open and daylight streaming in. And it made me very nervous doing that amount of daylight garden, that people actually wandered around in the gardens. Those were all on stage. And that was challenging. So it's a very different show from the ones that you're talking about. There was absolutely nowhere to go to. One had to really build it up from the ground, which was fantastic. It was an absolute treat to work on. And everything else that I've read or scripts that I've seen, everything pales by comparison. So I feel spoiled by that because it was such a lovely blank page to start with. Build it right from the ground up.
Yes, just to get, like, as you said, like, I have nothing. I'm just going to build it all.
Where do I start? And then in the samurai village, again, I thought I'd looked at this little car park and I thought, well, that's great. I'll build some houses up on the hillside and we'll create pathways. And again, it's almost like, Howard, you're talking about all those corridors. It's like, build it and they will come.
Yeah.
Because I don't know.
I mean, we had really smart writers, and as soon as they saw it, they used it. And
that's great.
So we're all challenged with that too when you come on early.
Yeah.
A lot of it isn't formed, and actually that's better for us. I mean, because I get input, and fortunately they're all very collaborative people and all quite smart, and they completely, would.
Yeah.
They really had to rely on you because, every inch of that was you,
Yeah.
or even, and
a host of others.
Yes.
I had a great.
That's what's beautiful about it. So that's why, they are very different. All the shows are very
radically
different.
And we were going to go to Japan at the beginning of the show. The mandate was, the brief was, right, well, we'll do 6 weeks in Japan. I thought, okay, great, fantastic, and then that just ebbed away, and then Japan was virtually shut down. You couldn't get in and out, terribly restrictive. And I came around to that realization that, okay, well, there's going to be nothing in Japan. So we had to build all the trees, all the beautiful cloud trees and things. Like, there's nothing, starting from the ground up, which was pretty thrilling.
Yeah, the gardens were beautiful. I was looking at them all, like going, because I know none of that,
Well, there's a few. It's funny because there's a few moments where I go, "Oh, it doesn't quite work." Like the lighting and there's a couple of moments that don't quite work for me, but generally I really love that the vistas, and we could rain on stage. That was the other thing because of all the rain in Vancouver. We had to match it, and then the rain became almost like a character in the film in the series. It just became this constant kind of slightly melancholy feel to things, and that really suited the
Definitely misty.
definitely it suited it suited the gravity, the weight of the show. I think it really helped for once.
Well, I know with Trevor, you definitely had weather as a as a character
Oh,
in
gosh.
your show. I mean, you definitely had snow and
Yeah.
yeah.
And this area, Calgary, is unpredictable at best when it comes to snow and those guarantees, and worse, the continuity of winter. So it's a moody place to say the least from a weather standpoint. But you get those magical moments that you don't plan for as well. We had an entire day once where this fog came in, and everybody was it was a series of really lengthy scenes, all exteriors at a rodeo grounds. And we thought, oh my God, like we're going to start this day in pea soup. And what are we going to do in the afternoon when it burns off? And it just so happened, sometimes you get these miraculous moments in film and television where it's better than you even imagined. And the fog actually strangely held all day long. And there's a sequence with Roy Tillman and Munch and Joe Keery's character, Gator, where there's these standoffs and it becomes very hyper real where the fog hangs in the entire day. And it was really quite magical. But I think, as we all know, the series of Fargo is of course, its baseline and its foundation stone is the Coen brothers movie. And the series and the aesthetic of Fargo by design is the absence of extravagance. It's about paring back and emptiness and openness and flatness. And I might even go so far as to say a mundane quality. So those were sort of the marching orders of a series like mine was getting breadth and quiet and emptiness as much, which is again its own struggle, as you all can imagine. We've talked about scope. We've talked about the push and pull of convenience and efficiencies of being close, staying in the zone. And it goes without saying that most modern cities, including my own here, don't look very good because they've essentially flipped themselves over. So to get that tired mid-century Americana and those big wide open spaces without modernity to the level that you might desire, you have to go further. So I think that's in this jurisdiction here in Calgary anyways, the biggest challenge for me was dragging producers kicking and screaming just a little bit further to get these voids that the show sort of demands, to get this emptiness. And part of that was, in fact, also as a local as well, having this knowledge of where the snow tends to hang, where the winds prevail, and using those to my advantage to create almost bankable topographies where, trust me, the snow's going to hang in this valley and it's going to look amazing. And so my goals were almost sparse, not thick, as far as, the sorts of, let's call them challenges I had from a design standpoint.
Yeah, I also love in your show the callback, the subtle callbacks to the original, that if you hadn't seen the original and it's been so long, it was so nice to like get that, to like indulge in that. And I thought it was so like, oh God, this is so nice. Like even the build that you have of the house and like the floor plan of it and everything, like it was I've rewatched the series because I loved it so much. I love that series.
It was a bit of a mandate, if you will, to have lots of explicit echoes from the film. So before I even had a locations department, set designer and myself, we redrew the house from the film based on edits, and we said, okay, well, let's start with Jerry Lundegaard's house as a baseline, and we'll use that as a conversation starter with Noah, the showrunner. And from there, then I, of course, like we all do, have to break down the script, and it's very action specific. So we have all sorts of shenanigans and breaking and entering and fire. And it became crystal clear to me very quickly that I had to have ultimate, again, it's the word I used earlier, control. There's no way we're going to find this house on location. There's no way that all these explicit echoes from the film are going to be tangible. So we have to build a house, both on location and in studio, for ultimate control, because there are 2 break and enters and a fire in this thing in the first 4 episodes. So there's so much violence that's so specific. So then we had to thread the needle to find a vacant lot in a neighborhood that had history to it, ideally earliest 20th century history, and it felt sleepy and sufficiently Minnesotan. So we eventually found that, and we convinced the landowners to hold off on their dream home and sublet it to us for another 9 months. So we built the house, reverse engineered from the interiors first, the house on location to get all those sleepy sort of John Carpenter exterior street perspectives. And then, of course, just replicated it in studio. So that's how we survived that one.
Okay, now I'm really nervous because I have to share my screen and I always screw this.
I hate that.
Hey, did it work? Is this working?
Yeah.
Does everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like my whole screen? Are you seeing yourselves on the side? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, now say I don't know how to preview. Can I do the whole thing? I don't know. Can I do the whole thing? This is the now I'll take this out and
What
post.
about the little green button on your left corner?
The little green button on my left
I
corner.
don't see it. Oh, should be.
Uh,
Nope.
I want to do the whole screen. Preview, file, view, see, enter full screen. How about that? Is that better?
Yep.
Got rid of that. You got rid of your toolbar.
Okay, and there's everybody's name. Now, those are your teams, your nominated teams,
Yeah.
which we all know there's so many people not on those credits right there because it takes an army. We all know that. So let's start with Fallout because I did this. I did it alphabetically. So here, Howard, do you want to talk a little bit about your set here?
Yeah, I mean, because I'm working from a game, and actually, it's funny, I didn't realize I picked this one particularly, but one of the things is it's a game that has a huge fan base. You can go on YouTube. I really researched it by going on YouTube, and because I can't play the game, I'm not good at that, and I could never get beyond the level. So I basically watch other crazy fans. They do entire produced shows, and they analyze everything, the history and everything. And I was kind of overwhelmed at first, and then I realized, oh wow, I have the critics of this. It's going to be, I don't know, how am I going to win these people over? But as I got into it, I began to like it because it's goofy there's I've been doing, and I was working with a group of people. We had done Westworld, which is sort of the opposite of this. Westworld's black, white, gray, and there's red for blood. That's it. This is color. It's like a really insane 50s kind of color thing. And it was like, and you can see what's funny about this particular shot is there's a lot of pat in some of the interiors and stuff. It's not really the 50s because it's actually set in 2077. It's a retro futuristic. I don't know why I've been doing those lately, but I mean, retro futuristic. So it's a 50s that's imagined. I mean, it's a future that is based on a culture that never got beyond the Eisenhower-ish era. So there's atomic things, there's all these crazy things. So it has its own thing. So the furniture, particularly in this, was there's an exaggeration to it. We actually had flashbacks in the show, and Regina Graves was the decorator. Actually, Regina Graves was the decorator, and Laura Ballinger Gardner was the supervising art director. And we had done a project, the polar opposite of this, called the Nick for Soderbergh. And it was like, I actually, when I talked to Soderbergh about the Nick, he doesn't like to talk about stuff in a way. It kind of like he wants you to come up with stuff. So he doesn't talk it out. You know what I mean? He's not one of those kinds of directors. But he did say to me, he said, on that show, he said, if I could do this in black and white, I would, but nobody will fund it. And David got to. So what I did was on that show, I just did everything black, white, gray, brown. I kind of, and I worked with Ellen Mirage, the costume designer, and we got together and made a palette and stuck to that. Whereas this was just insane. And I had to go to Jonathan Nolan, who really dislikes color. And I go, it's colorful. What do I do? So actually in this one, there's insane wallpaper. And this was our first kind of set like this. I actually had the scenic glaze the heck out of it because he had a physical reaction to it. I went, I can fix it. And then but after that, after we got into it and we kind of understood what the style of it is, because often when you're shooting, you don't always know what the style is. I mean, that was a thing actually with Soderbergh, and I worked with him for like 11 years. I had to be on set all the time because he would discover what the style of the shooting was, and therefore the lighting and everything else that was involved in it. Like I worked on one show and he was clearly shooting blank walls. Wherever he would aim the camera away from anything on the wall. And I realized I had to tell the decorator, we're taking things off the wall. He didn't say it to me. He just started shooting that. And then I started ranging furniture so they were in weird placement. So there was actually a window behind them. So they weren't shooting blank walls, but it wasn't a thing. So it's interesting, the whole process of this. This was, in that regard, this was similar where as we got into it, we embraced the insanity of it. And so yeah, and it's not one period, everything. So Regina printed, all the fabrics had to be custom printed because the rates are exaggerated. And they also weren't based on, we would use references from the 50s, but we wouldn't stick to them, in that way. We'd amplify them somewhere. And I hadn't really done that. Yeah, this was this was a set that in the game, this actually didn't exist in the game. Oh, I was going to say on the actually when the trailer came out, there were people who analyzed the trailer and they pointed out bolts with an arrow thing. They copied the bolt, and I was like, was that crazy? But
right. Super fans.
Fortunately, I was fortunate enough that our show wasn't based on one of the games. It was a new piece. So, and this specifically, it was a cornfield inside a vault. And it was scripted originally as
this first episode is bonkers, by the way.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So there was this whole,
you haven't seen at least the first episode.
Yeah, it was funny. Regina went to the producer. It was like, it was right. We were in COVID still, and we went to the producer, and I was on. Regina had a check for, I forgot how many thousands of dollars. We had to buy 10,000 ears of corn, fake corn from China, and it was going to take 4 months to get that. And so we were like panicking, and he was going, why am I signing this check? But to do all this artificial corn. And then for this, in the script, there was a giant room that they decided, yeah, it should be an acre at least of corn, which meant that we couldn't really shoot it in a studio. And it was scripted that the walls were painted with a like Oklahoma kind of version of Nebraska. And I sort of said, what if it was projected? So we went through this whole then they all went crazy with like futuristic projection systems. And so this was done in the digital stage. And what's weird, in the digital stage, you spend a lot of time trying to make your asset on the wall look as real as possible. This was the opposite, where we were trying to make it look artificial. So we called it 2.5D. So we did this thing, and later on there's a giant fight in here, and they shoot the projector, and the film burns up, and so it was fun. So, and this set was designed so that in the digital stage it was symmetrical. So we were shooting, we would flip all the stuff in the middle, and we'd get the other side, which was actually the vault. But yeah, so it's fun. And I said, if we do it as a projection, they can get married and have at sunset, and they can have a moonlight dancing thing afterwards. And that's what we did. So it was fun.
I think, is it all of you in the season that you're nominated for, were you shooting during COVID?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
we're all, which was
yeah, part of it, yes.
Yeah.
we shot for a long time, and uh, right at the last week is when Amazon said you could take your mask off if you were in Group A, and I was
Right.
in Group A. So I had to wear my mask, and nobody else did. It was like really, but
Fun.
oh yeah, uh this is actually at Steiner Studios. They have a container lot, and of course I use the containers as a part of the
Uh,
set. And this was well, this is a tribute to Regina Graves, because in New York, the decorators can they actually do parts in other places that construction handles, but all this sort of all these materials and stuff, a lot of it's real, and I got trying to make it safe so the construction crew could work with materials like that was pretty, but we didn't buy a door or a window or anything for this. She found it all. She
Wow.
was amazing, even the, it was great. And oh, and you can see on the right there's the tip of on the very right of frame, there's a jet engine
mm,
that's 48
mm.
feet in the air. That
Wow.
jet fuselage.
Right.
Yeah, the production manager was particularly mad at me about that one. So it required a lot of all these rickety, rackety buildings are this amount of steel is insane, because we're in New York City. You can see it in the background. We, of course, replaced it actually with a bombed out LA, which was sort of interesting. But the winds were quite hard, and we actually got above this container wall. So it all had to be engineered. The engineering took quite a while to try to make something look as rickety as this is. And we modeled all of it and every piece. So all the set designers and stuff had a finished rendered building that was modeled, because trying to get all this wonkiness is always a
How long did
challenge.
this take to dress or to build?
Oh God, it was a while. I actually don't remember. It was unfortunately, we finished it in August. I think we started in March,
Mm.
and it was 104. Yeah. And so we had to have cooling stations, and it was one point, and it was tough, and we'd have to get people to take breaks and do all this stuff. But there's a lot, you can see it's basically a town made out of salvage. So there's a lot of salvage stuff, or garbage, basically. And I walked in, and all the garbage up high had been placed, but nothing below had. And it was so hot that I just looked, and I said, hey, why don't I do that give me a group of people. So I went around, because they were all ready to stop because it was so hard. And if I didn't physically get in there myself, I just had to prove that we could do it. And so fortunately, and it was amazing what they ended up doing. So,
So
and a lot
much.
of this blew up. A lot of this blew up and caught fire, and the stuff. So
No, the scenes in it are crazy, and it's shot beautifully, and the light streaming through when they go inside is gorgeous.
yeah,
And
what was great is because we had that whole virtual art department and stuff. We actually scouted this all virtually when VR glasses and stuff, and I could show everybody where the sun was. So we actually blocked everything and I rotated all the buildings exactly where Jonathan Nolan wanted the sun to be exactly. So we actually figured that out, on the day that we were going to cheat. We knew which day it was. So I'd never really gotten to do it on that level where we actually built sequences around where the sun was, because as we all know, and what Martin was saying and everybody, it's all about the light. The lighting is what, you really have to take that, half of design or more is lighting. And so trying to get that effect. And so we got to model all the buildings, and I knew when we were going to shoot them, and I knew where the light was going to be. It was cool. That was really fun. I'd never gotten to do that. I usually don't have time, but I did have a lot of time. So I'm really grateful, the way it worked.
it's beautifully destructive.
Yeah.
Our next show is Fargo, Trevor, and this is just, as you were saying, beautiful and just
Wow.
the plane and the sky. Look at the sky you got that day.
Yeah, we do good sky here for sure. But this photograph that I contributed really, I think, speaks to a lot of what we were talking about, where through your scouting process, you often come up short. Often it just doesn't, the set you might require isn't there or is untenable or too costly or just has too many compromises. So thankfully on a show like Fargo, I have the creative support to make sure to get it right. And Noah is wonderfully stubborn and specific about what he's after sometimes. And that can be both a blessing and a curse. But in this case, I think it turned out to be a blessing where we drove all over Alberta, of course, distant locations, trying to find this standalone gas station, filling station that has, again, four nights we shot of violence and interactivity on this lone highway. And the approach was as important as the actual set itself. So to find that a lone 2-lane highway, blacktop, with all the signage and that sort of Christmas tree in the night, as Dana described it, we just weren't getting it. And at a certain juncture, I had to just call and say, listen, we have to build this thing. There were no less than, I think, 19 specific interactions inside where somebody has to pick up a particular piece of merchandise or do something violent with it. So I said, there's just no way. So let's move on to an alternative sort of thought here that we're going to build it. We're going to find the highway and reverse engineer the set back into that. So again, we tried that. And, as we all know, locking up roads for nights at a time is hardly an easy thing. So then the next challenge was, and you have to just keep persevering. It's our job. You just can't let go of the core aesthetic, the core goal. And I was like, well, where else can we find blacktop that we might be able to play with? So we started investigating abandoned airstrips. So I found an airstrip just outside of Calgary that was sufficiently rural, where there was at least some baseline pavement, if you will. And then we had to make our road. So we made a kilometer of highway because Noah had all these long tracking inside the car oneers, if you will, to arrive at this beacon in the night. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to now build the highway, drive past this, have the state trooper spot them, do the lights in the back and do that all as an integrated space. So the set was ultimately a kilometer long with this filling station in it. And of course, we have all the running in the night. And that one shot that's my favorite, maybe of the whole series, frankly, is when Lamorne, it's his point of view looking back out from in the filling station into the blackness of night. And it's such a pure cinematic image of the wilderness for me, where the light literally just falls off and the grasses are there. So anyway, I think case in point, we have to stick to our guns sometimes, I think, is the takeaway. And you have to just keep fighting and make a case for yourself and horse trade with producers about, okay, if I do this, then perhaps we can compromise over here to fulfill this particular dream. And it was really fun. And it was one of the early sets. And we had an imminent snowstorm coming. And Noah really wanted to get a sense of Halloween and weather shift in the series. So this was episode 1. So on top of everything else, we had this plan, we were underway, and they determined that they needed to pull it up in the schedule by 11 days. So the art department just rolled up their sleeves.
Thanks.
I can't speak highly enough about my art director, Nathan Blackie, and just staying calm, frankly, when I wasn't calm with this ask. And we just did it. And the graphics team just sat down and they had scrums every morning about who's going to do what, aisle by aisle, product by product, what's getting blown up. And fast-tracked this completely 360 set by 11 days sooner than we anticipated in an always aggressive schedule. So I think for me, it symbolizes our fortitude as art departments. And I think we could all agree that we, for better or worse, do amazing things under great duress. And this is a case in point of that. But I think when it all came down and we zoomed out and appreciated what we'd accomplished, I think we'd sufficiently protected the idea, which I think is a big part of our job, to set them up for success. So they had like 4 or 5 nights of action and activity here where they could comfortably control the roads, do all the things they needed to. and mission accomplished. So for me, it's a great symbol, I think, of when we as art departments are at our best. And sometimes, through a series of forks in the road and decisions and challenges and obstacles, sometimes the best idea wins at the end. And I think that's when we're all at our best. So
I couldn't agree more. I think it's all about sticking to the idea and convincing people to support you.
Beautiful.
yeah.
I also included the house just so we could see.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah, so
Because
this was the lion house that we built. That was the vacant lot, and it had some really beautiful cottonwoods, or poplars as we call them here, around it that I fought hard to preserve. So we built around every branch we could, with the
Yeah.
understanding that we had some.
If you haven't seen the series, the house catches on fire, and then they
Yeah, there was also fire. So I had to,
these poor
I had
people's
to,
houses.
yeah. So trust me, the guy on the left was real nervous. That blue guy, because we had fire and body drops literally on location with cranes right there, and he was watching through his window with his kids,
Yeah.
hoping to hell that the special effects department was doing what they were supposed to.
You probably had to convince him yourself and go and tell him it was
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. We have to
Indeed,
do
there
that.
was a lot of glad handing on that street, I can tell you.
The opening of our show where we have a house that is all made out of glass and an atomic bomb goes off. And it was a period house, and I looking at it and going like, the window frames are all original in this house that was built in the 60s. And I went to the guy and I go, it's double pane glass. How did you do this? And he said, oh, I took all the frames out of the entire house, sent them to Germany, and had the glass made and sent back. And I go, and
You let
then
us
of
shoot
course
here?
the first thing people ask me when they walk up is, can we take the walls of glass out? And I was going, yeah.
Yeah.
And we did, but it's like that. And the guy goes, it's okay. And I go, are you sure? I mean, I can't guarantee that I'm not going to break this thing. It was like, but he agreed. It was like, and it was like in his perfectly restored house. And I go, it's insane.
Yeah.
Well,
It's wild, but this
as
is
salesmen,
the
what you
tightrope of
have
us.
to do to like convince people, yeah, it's okay, we can do. Um,
Yeah, and I think we'd all agree a big part of our job is, I think, even if you don't totally believe it, you have to uphold a certain level of swagger and belief as,
Absolutely.
as leaders. And you might be, it's a tightrope walk on a partial lie, but sometimes you just have to forge ahead, because if you stop believing, everybody else will too. And I think this was, for me on this particular show, another one of those large forks in the road where I held my ground, and I'm so proud of myself for doing it, where I was like, listen, we're not going to cheat this through, 4 or 5 different locations and homeowners, living rooms. It's just not going to work. And that's when you apply your experience, when you've been down these roads enough times, particularly with action and violence, and where it's just like control is everything. And I think let's just put our budget in the right places, and make sure control and the shot is protected at all costs. So
Yeah.
Beautiful. The Gentleman. I like the name of this episode. Tackle Tummy Boo Boo.
Very
Okay.
And this must have hurt everyone's eyes. I mean, really.
Okay, so there's a lot to talk about here. So this is the skunk farm that they have in the grounds of this country house. And I mean, I don't smoke. So, but I had to do a lot of research on skunk farms and what they look like, who has them, where are they, and I wasn't ever allowed to go to a one like this, but I got photographs of them because there's the dope man in London who who has fake dope plants, and he knows all of these rather fabulous characters, and he got me photographs. So, and there are shops actually where you can go and buy all of the hydroponics and the lighting, etc., etc., etc. So there's a wealth of information, but of course you have to design a set that works for the action, the violence,
Right.
the dialogue, and I don't know if you know about Guy Ritchie, but he changes the dialogue every morning. So every morning he gets to work and the set's always ready. And then he spends an hour or 2 hours or 3 or 4 in his trailer changing the dialogue. Meanwhile, I'm sort of like, I've got buyers out getting bottles of brandy or shotguns or cricket balls or whatever he decides to put in the scene. So you have to have enough scope on the sets I build for him to cover, I don't know what he's going to throw at me. So we had these containers, and this was all in a stage in a studio because it's supposed to be underground. And I had all these containers, and I used real containers in the end because they're quite easy to cut holes in, and they're a great starting point to mount all these amazing lights. And the DOP was quite particular about his lighting colors, and I said to him, well, you know, when the plants grow at different stages, you change the color of the lighting. So it starts off yellow and then it goes pink, and he says, oh, I really like that idea. So we had these lights that could change color to whatever he wanted, and hence the frame you've got with this magenta lighting. But we had to make all of the plants because you can't yeah, there they are. You can't move plants. You can buy them, but you can't move them because you need a special license. So we just built we bought all the we got all the silk leaves made in China, imported them, and then had this factory making dope plants. And we made them in Brixton, which I don't know if you know London, but Brixton's a very sort of Afro-Caribbean area. And we made them in this old theatre. And the day we were loading up the truck, we almost had a riot because everybody, all the locals saw all these huge dope plants coming out of this church hall, going onto our lorry, and it was horrific. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's one of the funnest sets really, and the most exciting to have done. And we put silver foil on the walls to give extra reflection. And the trouble with the DOP, I love using mirrors, and this DOP hates mirrors and he hates glass doors. And so I have to be very, very careful that I can pivot and move things. But we had to sort of age the silver foil down and use the back of it so it wasn't that reflective. In the end, he loved it. So it's convincing our collaborators a lot of the time that what we're going to deliver is going to look as best as it possibly can, and just taking them on a ride. And nowadays I just do what I think is right and live with the consequences. But it has been, you know, this was one of those sets which we just needed to have a leap of faith to get it looking so good.
Well, yeah, I would think too that in getting it right, and we all know what it has to be, but sometimes like with the lighting like that, like the effect of costumes and the effect of, you know,
Yes.
everything, it affects so many other departments, but it has to be right. We can't falter just because, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We had water mists in here with special effects, and then we had blue screens to extend the scope of it. So you've got this magenta lighting in one area, and then you're lighting blue screens in another, and then we've got green screens in a further bit. So it was very, very complex. And you know, we did talk at one stage about having 3M's dungarees for everybody so that they'd be illuminated. But it was a bit of a stretch too far, really. I'm glad we didn't do it. When I saw this magenta, I was like, oh my God, that's a bit out there. But it did create a wonderful environment. And of course, the piece is all about this underground dope skunk farm, which is in God knows how many country houses all over the UK.
I think too, it's such, I put this this
Oh, Susie's office. Okay, yeah.
I loved because I think it's such a turn from everything. And I think your set decorator too, Linda Wilson, such, because I don't have her on the other podcast to talk about, but the amount, there's such incredible details in the rest of your sets and everything, but this and everything else is so elaborate and everything, but this one is so subtle but so much detail in your
Yeah.
sets. And I
Well,
just wanted to give a shout out to the rest of your sets of and not have that big purple magenta on the set.
totally. This set was really interesting because we were running out of money.
Yeah.
Everybody does. And my construction manager had just done a 14th century film, and he said, "Oh, I built all this oak paneling, Martin, and it's going to be put in the skip." So I rang the producer and I said, "Can I have it all?" Because even I had 6 sets to put in this studio, and I just didn't have any space or didn't have any money, and so I got all this oak paneling, and I just lime washed it and gave it this sort of like, I don't know, weird feel, a bit like a country house, but modern. And that became Susie's office. And yeah, it is very different to everything. It's
Yeah.
because it's at the boxing ring, which they operate. Yeah,
Yeah.
gosh.
The boxing ring is so much fun too.
Well, that was the last corner of the studio, and all I did there was paint the walls. I brought a boxing ring in, I painted the walls, and I just covered them in photos and pictures of the boxing people that worked there, because we just had no money left, and it was the only space we had, and it was probably one of the most successful sets. We had to put drapes for walls because we needed to take them away to give us space to get the shooting crew in. So it's amazing what happens when necessity dictates and set design evolves, and I quite like that part of our business and our work, really. It's amazing. You wouldn't often think about doing things, but because of restrictions, you have to.
Have to. Necessity dictates.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Beautiful. All of it beautiful. All right, David, you're up. You ready? This is, of course, Ripley's apartment.
Yeah. So go ahead, ask a question.
Well,
Is this in Rome?
This is at Cinecittà, stage 5.
Okay. Yeah.
And sort of a small bit of story. Tom's Rome apartment, as well as his SRO apartment in New York, were built on the same stage and only divided by a green screen. These were the first two. Andrew went in, we did all the New York stuff at one end of the stage, and then moved over to his Rome apartment. A little bit out of continuity.
I'm just noticing that door over there is like a closet with books in it.
Yeah.
Who signed that? That's like a.
What's up with that? Yeah. It was in a palazzo apartment I saw along the way, and I just thought it was great. And in fact, and there's one at the other end of the room, and both of them were wild because other than the front door through the corridor there, we had to have more access into the set. So without pulling walls. So it was a door and it was a bookcase.
And that fireplace is really interesting. There's a mural in the fireplace.
Yeah, it's a fire screen. So
wow, I didn't know.
During the warm months when you're not using the fireplace,
Yeah.
You put your screen, and that was, I mean, again, all this wonderful work by our decorator, Alessandra Querzola, our scenic artists. That little fire screen was, I had an image of a fire screen that I liked, and Paolo, one of the scenic artists, just whipped that up for us. All the beautiful sort of foam marble on the doorways. The doorways were meant to be wood and then painted in foam marble. The parquet floor, all the wonderful, wonderful talent that we had.
I have.
And I'll say, just going back to that, one of the tricks of that set was that I'm like a sucker for authenticity, and we scouted a lot of palazzo apartments, and this is based on one of sort of my favorite apartments along the way architecturally, and so laid the whole thing, drew it up, laid the whole thing out on the stage floor so that Steve, our director, could come and have a look at it. and with some folding chairs and tables. And Steve said, "You know what? It's just too small." I said, "Steve, A, it's what it should be, and B, if we make it any larger, it's just going to be a heck of a lot of set dressing and artwork to fill the walls." But he said, "No, I really imagine when Ravini comes in, he wants to sort of be able to wander around the whole apartment while he's interrogating Tom." And so, reluctantly, we made the whole space, I think, 4 feet deeper, 2 feet wider. Alessandra had to find a heck of a lot more stuff to fill the space up. And if you've seen the episode, Ravini walks in, he takes a seat in that leather chair and never gets up.
Yeah.
I was going to say it was a very spacious apartment. I liked the scale of it. I thought that was great. But yeah, no,
it was too spacious. It was too spacious.
Well, I'm always told whenever I present schemes to Guy Ritchie, I'm always told to make them 30% bigger.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I would have thought about bumping off a few people to keep that apartment. So I thought it justified some of
Yeah, really.
I think it's great.
Well, it looks like he's going to have a party. I mean, for being such a...
There was room enough for a party. There's never more than 3 people in that apartment at any one time.
But if he's taking on Dickie's persona, he would have a party. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah.
Absolutely.
It looked like my stepmother's sister, Giulietta's husband was the head of the Carbonieri, and their apartment looked a lot like this. So I was sort of like, wow. It was like, it was it was about that scale too, which was unusual.
You have these photos of this.
Yeah.
This hall.
And then this is entrance to Tom's SRO studio, again on stage 5 as well at Cinecittà. And the great treat here is, aside from myself and my supervising art director, my wife Karen Schultz Rothman, our entire art department was Italian. Luckily, Italians that we had worked with before and had a great relationship with. But sort of to be able to be the mentors to our art director on this particular set as to what was correct for New York City architecture was kind of great fun and getting it right.
Yeah, and the aging is fantastic, and the payphone
and the talent in all departments sort of exceptional. All of this, you mentioned Regina Graves. Regina helped us on both shows that we did in Rome, load up a container of set decoration.
She sent stuff to you. Oh, great. Yeah.
The pond, yeah.
And then you have Tom's New York apartment.
Yeah, so my first love, and it's all based on, great research that we had. We had a team, we had researchers in Rome, New York, and London. Looking at these, photographs from 30s, 40s, 50s of SRO residences in New York, which there are many, just so much great research to pull from.
And there's a good example of a blank wall that's definitely not blank.
Well, yeah.
And that wire, and it's just
right.
It's awesome. So
now, if this is my photograph of the set before we started shooting, and when Steve walked in, he thought, "Could we just have a little bit more wire?" So there is a second string of wire, kind of mirroring this one, and then we ended up putting a little painting on that hook there because.
Well, I love the way this is. This is
yeah,
exactly.
Don't we all have photos of our sets and then what was shot? Don't we all have those double?
I know.
I have to say, to Steve's credit, usually he was asking us to pull back a little bit more. But if you want a second row of wire, then give them a second row of wire.
Yeah, it's beautiful, 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 beautiful.
And then Helen had to deal with the most simple of simple. It's so hard to do. Very hard.
Yeah. There you go, Helen. Look at that. Look at those moves.
Well, there it is in rather its not particularly glorious lighting, but yeah, we had acres of garden, as I mentioned. Every time you turned around or went down a corridor or opened a door, you you needed to have quite a depth of a depth of garden there. Early on in the process, we were going to have a very large green screen around the sets on stage. That idea flew out the window rapidly, and we were given a little bit more money to do a painted drop. So what we did was we did about
These painted drops, cool.
I know we did about 350 feet of scenic cotton, painted in a very light, hazy, non-committal sky drop, which was our basic backing. And then also to break that up, we built gates and encircled the sets with a stone wall in order to create a viable set to shoot into. And as you can see by the lights that are hanging there, not a lot of that sky was ever retained. But it was a starting point. And a lot of our gardens are, this again is a bit scruffy, I'm not sure when this was taken, but there's a lot of moss everywhere and a lot of gravel and very, very simple greenery. We had a really good greens department who could rapidly change over. We had to do a whole seasonal thing as well. We had to go into cherry blossoms, we had to go into snow, we had to go into autumnal colors, spring. This is just one corner of a set. This is actually what we were shooting into, wasn't there? Was one scene played on this engawa, this veranda, and it was just a sort of background corner of one of our sets. Yeah, this again, not very well lit, and there's an apple box over there. Our main hall was a little bit of a corruption of the correct architecture. What I found early on was a 19th century model of a ceremonial meeting hall, and it was sort of deconstructed so that I could see clearly up into the upper regions of the set. There were these large timbers, like some of the beams were made from whole tree trunks, and invariably those rooms had flat ceilings. So if you can imagine this set with a ceiling below the gold details across, and I thought right away, well, that's incredibly restrictive in terms of lighting. You can't quite see it, but in the upper regions we had banks of windows that had screens that would flop down or go up in order to create shafts of light, to create variety, because this set had to play in numerous episodes. It was also a bit of a transformer set because I could actually subdivide it. The nice thing about these gold panels was that you could just lift them out and off they go. And you could, except the upper ones, the upper above the main series of Fusuma doors, the upper panels we did plantons. So I turned the set into a couple of other meeting rooms, and I put in a false ceiling at one point, which took us about a week to achieve in between episodes, and it's a very dull photo, but you do see a lot of in this series. You'll see an awful lot of daylight streaming in from both sides and also from above. We get lovely shafts of light. So it was a little bit of a corruption. It took me a little bit of persuading. We had a very particular historical advisor who hadn't really got any film experience per se. He was incredibly helpful on so many levels, but I think he found this hard to accept, this opened ceiling, and we just all collectively agreed to take the gamble because of what that gave us. in terms of visual interest.
Did you guys shoot on film?
No.
Okay. Yeah, well, that was because the formatting, you didn't feel that, it wasn't, it felt elongated to me, but it wasn't, was it?
No.
No, it wasn't. Yeah. We actually shot on film, which is bizarro.
Right. Yeah.
So, but we wanted that sort of 50s Western looking thing, but I actually, yours felt like film to me. So whatever the processing, and it hadn't, maybe it was all the mist. It was like amazing. The lighting was quite beautiful and soft but direct, but invaded the rooms in a lovely way. And
Right.
Yeah.
It's a lot of smoke. We had an awful lot of atmosphere.
Oh, you did? Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, a lot of atmosphere. And as I say, we had rain on stage and at locations. Again, sorry, these are rather dull photos. This is just one looking down one avenue of our Osaka street. We created four blocks and created a central area. We didn't know episode 8 was going to be the building of the city of Edo. And I had no real idea what I was going to do, except that I created a large area in the middle of this set, which I just left vacant. I thought, okay, when I get a little bit further along, I'm going to develop buildings that are under construction. And so we did. We created brand new timbered buildings. What we did was we also took some of these aged down buildings and we painted them to look new, as if the timber was all refreshed again. So this was much further on in the process. We had many gates. You'll see on the left-hand side, we had a long courtyard that was over 300 feet long, primarily for one particular scene in one episode. And that was a group of people trying to leave the city and being stopped at every gate. So the set just got longer and longer and longer. This set in the upper left corner is the main gate into the West Palace set. You can see there's a courtyard through there with a large curved roof. That was quite a large empty courtyard. I wanted to put paving in, I wanted to put trees in, and at every turn, the answer was no, it really needs to be empty. And it is very empty. And we have got many, many scenes take place in that courtyard in the upper left corner there. This structure over the gate we turned it into a house where there are pigeons in the storyline, where the character Toranaga has got secretly sending messages via pigeon. And these gatehouses were typically used to store weaponry. So we decided, okay, well, it's a secret place. We built the interior on stage and filled it with weaponry. And it's quite claustrophobic. Lovely little cages and such. It was fun to do the pigeon coop set. And these whopping great doors. Everywhere you look, the doors are hugely thick and studded. And a lot of this was gleaned. We couldn't really use 19th century photography. That was a bit of a pitfall, because everything had in the 17th century, things were quite different. And so we used an awful lot of scrolls and paintings as our reference. In fact, that was our primary source of visual reference. And I got to say, I got to do a shout out to the Met. The Met website's fantastic. And there'll be times on set where you'd be halfway through shooting a scene and one of our advisors would query an object or query a particular type of vegetable that we're growing in the garden in the background, and I'd immediately get called, or somebody on set we'd immediately find the reference and send it, because it was, yes, it has to be exact. That was the thing about the whole show, and I think it shows in the final product, just the level of care and attention that went into every aspect. Every single hair on everybody's head. There were people who were brought in from Japan who just tied knots. And you go, well, okay, everybody sinks into this level of detail. And that was what was remarkable. It was like we're all strangers in a strange land in a way, because none of us have been to 17th century Japan. we had a very large Japanese contingent on the show, both actors and advisors and all sorts of people looking after hair and makeup. And it really was like visiting another planet.
Mm.
Yeah.
So much detail. And then I threw this guy in because
finally, the very last set, and I rejoiced in this because there's not a single bit of rice paper in this set. And I just thought, wow, okay, so he's an old man, he's in bed, it's ambiguous, you know, did he go back to England? Did he stay? This was our very last set, and it was such a treat. It was just one room, and it was a scene we focused mainly on the character lying in the bed and two little boys over near the fireplace looking at some of the artifacts there. And it was just so refreshing after months, a year and a half of rice paper and woven materials, like woven straw and incredible greenery and such. It was just lovely to do something totally different. And it doesn't get an awful lot of screen time, but it was a fun set to finish
and
on.
It's so plain. I mean, it's like, you know.
Oh yeah, no, it was sad to be, you know, the idea being that he lived, and this would be late 1600s. Yeah, it was nice doing the floor, and I didn't pay too much attention to the ceiling, but the floor was a lot of fun, and building the four-poster and getting the fabric on the bed right. Again, it was a joy because so many of our sets were so spare.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like we were constantly editing and removing and replacing. You know, the very first time with one of our Japanese interiors, I had a vase and I had this incredible kind of beautiful, I cut them from my garden, this flowering quince. And one of our advisors went, no. And so I ended up with something that looked like a little jam jar with one thing sticking out of it. Like, okay, that looks right. Okay.
Setting the tone.
Getting your head into that, the absence of dressing in a way, or just being super specific about what does end up on set. This was such a treat just to fill it and play around with real dressing.
Oh my God. Well, it's beautiful. Beautiful. Well, I don't know who to vote. How can you vote for? See, that's why we need to split categories. Everyone needs to win. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
Everyone needs.
That sounds good. I'll go for that.
And
I did tie for
more stories. To everybody's credit, I'm just going to say those war stories aren't evident in the work. The work is seamless and meaningful and beautiful. So congratulations.
Yes, I mean you always want to say like what was the hardest part, but
Right.
You always want to say like what was your favorite part of this? Like what was the most exciting thing about these projects for you? Helen, do you want to go? Like what was your most
I think it was the very first dailies that I saw. Actually the camera test. I was like, whoa, oh my God. And the actors were so phenomenal. And the costumes and the sets they were incredible in the camera tests.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, we're onto something here, you know. That, and actually one of my favorite photos I took myself of the actor playing Toranaga in that gold room, which in the photo that you just shown looks incredibly dull. But that set just glistened, and it made my heart flutter. I thought, God, I had no idea until the whole package came together.
No.
I'm not sure what the question was, but anyway, I'm gushing.
No, that was it. That was it.
I think we were really, really stretched, dressing lots of sets all over the place. And we were doing the billionaire's party where he introduces all of the aristocrats and tries to get them to build more skunk farms. And I remember doing a party years ago, and we brought a merry-go-round in, and everybody just loved it. All of the guests at the party just loved it. So I said, right, I'm going to get a merry-go-round in, and it was a nightmare because we had to put trackway down, and I didn't tell Guy Ritchie because I probably forgot, or I just didn't want to be, turned down. And so he arrived, that day, and it was a night shoot, and I was just leaving, and he just said, I love the merry-go-round, Martin. That's great. And it was just, everybody was on it. And it was just such a joyous moment, actually. It was great. So I like the sets to have joy so that people that don't know what you're doing, they walk onto it and they just get it. There's a gasp and they love it. So that was a moment, really. It was great.
Oh, that's awesome. Trevor?
I think a similar, let's call it excitement that you simply can't replicate. Often for me, that first day of photography, where there's trepidation. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, no matter how solid of a bond we built with a director or a DP or a set of producers, you're always nervous. And as my partner tells me, anxiety and excitement are basically the same chemicals in your body. And I think for me on this season of Fargo anyways, it was a reasonably small set, but a really important one for me was the diner scene when we first introduced ourselves to Sheriff Roy Tillman with the coffee across the table from that sort of bad dad, if you will. And I think it's that first day where they throw up a lens and the atmosphere is in the room and the lights are pounding in all the right places. And you see that first sort of setup. It's usually a wide shot, of course, and you're like, oh my gosh, we did it. And nobody's upset. And in fact, they're all thrilled and excited. And we're going to do this for another 5 months together. So there's this sort of letting go and this a combination of relief and joy that maybe you've just hitched your wagon to something really special. So day one is always special for me, no matter what. And we're people pleasers at heart. And I think we really want to launch somebody's vision and take care of it. So I think when it happens, and you feel safe and secure and confident going forward, that's a great feeling.
Feels good. Howard?
It's similar to Helen when watching the actors. This I don't think anybody kind of knew how big the sets were, and as they started growing, and I kept trying to tell everyone, but nobody would really listen to me in the beginning. Oh no, these are kind of, and when they walked in, just their faces, like they were kind of in shock, but then they inhabited the space. When you watch the actors inhabit the space and take it all in, and it affects their performance. That's pretty exciting. That's an exciting thing. Yeah. And then the thing on this show was it was hard. It was pretty hard, and it was also tough. But the things were so wacko, and that people would come and thank me because they were having so much fun making stuff. And I don't think I'd quite had it on that level where it was both incredibly hard but also super fun to do, because it was like you'd see it all come together, and it would just like the merry-go-round, it would put a smile on your face. But I think probably the most rewarding thing is watching the actors inhabit it and really get and have it change their character. And I was like, to see them, it made it real for them in a way that because we didn't do tons of CG actually, so that was super rewarding. So
awesome. And David?
Yeah, I mean, you asked that question. Now thinking back, truth be told, we had a very long prep period. But even with that, we literally raced from set to set to location to location. And I don't know, the first day that Andrew came to walk the sets, both his apartment in New York and Rome, that was pretty gratifying to sort of see finally an actor in one of the spaces. And then really sort of the only kind of bonus was the couple of weeks we had in Capri shooting the interior of Dickie's villa.
Oh, wow.
Slowed down. And we're in this great place. So yeah, I don't know. We kept moving around a lot.
Yeah,
great space.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I do think that when the actors get in there and the camera's in there and it comes alive, it does still give you butterflies. It doesn't matter once your set comes alive. It is still magical. That's why we're here. Thank you all so much. I'm sorry if this went a little long, but I love talking to you, and I love hearing about all this. And congratulations on your nominations, so well deserved, and good luck. I will see you there. So
Okay.
Thank you very much.
thank you so much, and good luck.
Good luck, everybody.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Thank you all. Great work, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.